of interesting other relationship which will show up in both the multiple choice and potentially, though not always, on the vignette is the idea of security. And so what does this mean? Well, the simple way, the way that it might show up in terms of the vignette is very much about the kind of view control. So we talked about how somebody in the restaurant may not want to be able to see the loading dock, and so using the coniferous trees to block that view. Well, if you flip that idea and you say, okay, instead of it being a loading dock, maybe this is the sidewalk or something at the street point. And by having a bunch of coniferous trees there, I've effectively made it so that people on the sidewalk can't see somebody walking on the site. And so I'm losing that sense of security of people being able to watch out for each other, to be able to see that there's a danger coming, or to be able to just kind of, somebody's not going to want to do something that would be damaging because they can be seen up by people on the street. So when you hear security, that is typically going to mean sight lines, and therefore it's not going to be about deciduous trees. It's likely to be, if we're talking about landscaping, it's likely to be about coniferous trees because it's about sight lines, keeping them open. When you get to other topics, security can show up in all kinds of different ways. So, for example, I forget, there's a specific term that people, I think it's called the rose bush concept or something like that, which is one of the main ways that you can deter burglaries is by having rose bushes or something else that has thorns underneath all the windows on the ground floor of your house, for example. And the concept there is, if you're a burglar and you go up and you're like, I got to battle through a bunch of thorns, or I could just go next door, they're going to go next door. Like, who wants to battle a bunch of thorns, right? So there are other ways to think about security, and there are other examples of ways that people will talk about them in the multiple choice, but nothing that sort of tricky or nuanced would show up on the vignette. It will only be this very simple version. All right.
Maybe before we go on, Mike, let's see, we have a question here. Will they intentionally place trees on the vignette so that there is a limited arrangement of building, parking, roads that's possible?
Yeah, on the site plan, that's a really good question. On the site planning vignette, so first of all, site planning vignette, there'll be a whole bunch of trees, and there'll be some rule somewhere that will say, they could use different numbers, but usually it's 6 trees. You can't bulldoze more than 6 trees. So always aim for fewer than that, because you may find at the last possible second you forgot something and you need to take out another tree. So you're going to be taking some trees away, but then you'll be adding other trees into other locations. So when you first look at the site plan, it will probably be almost impossible to just place the buildings and the parking and everything in the site. You would almost always have to remove at least one tree or something. So one of the things you want to practice when you're practicing the vignettes, this particular vignette, is you want to practice that, being able to look at that and see, all right, if I got rid of this one, that opens up a big, large area, that's probably where, or if I get rid of this one, but I don't want to get rid of a grouping of 3 or a grouping of 4 or something, because that's going to be too many all at once, and it's bound to be 1 or 2 more in other locations I'm going to have to get rid of, and I'm going to go over that limit. So is there only one way to do it? No. There's going to be a few ways to answer any one of these vignettes. There's going to be 2 probably easy-ish, and the kind of the ones that they expect, the 2, maybe 3. And they'll all be sort of variants off of each other. And then there'll be a couple of outliers that you can figure out how to kind of fit them in. But there's not that many ways to do any of them. The buildings are pretty big. And when you're doing it, it'll always be something like, I've got a great big site, and in that site I have let's say a creek that runs through, and that creek has a offset that doesn't allow me to build up close to it. So I'm going to have something that I have to deal with, and then there's going to be a certain road, and there's going to be some other stuff, and I have to have an entranceway, and then I'm going to put in a big building. So these things are big things. So there's not going to be that many choices. I got to put a parking lot in, and then I got to get a driveway to the road with the parking lot. So there won't be that many choices, but generally, as you go through it, you'll find that, all right, there's a bunch of trees over here, there's a bunch of stuff up in here, and then there's like a tree there. You're like, all right, clearly I'm getting rid of that tree, so I have plenty of space to make this thing work. So you're always looking for what's the fast way that I can open up a bunch of space, but with only losing a couple of the trees in that process. And then as you start doing the driveways and things like that, you'll probably lose another tree or two, and you're trying to keep it to maybe 3, maybe 4 trees. And then there's some rule about, well, we're trying to block the wind from, say, here. So once we've gone through, well, now we're going to add a bunch of coniferous trees all right there. And if I'm really doing it, I'm going to do them staggered if it says it's really important. And that way the wind really can't get through. It would go right on by because we've just made this wind block. So this is, like I said, it's not rocket science. Don't overthink it. Just find a way to say, all right, how do I open up space, get rid of a couple trees? How do I use the trees to do whatever the 3 or 4 things they're going to ask me to do? It won't be super complicated, but if it says to do something, you got to do it. If it says to block the wind, don't put 1 tree. If it says to provide shade, put at least a couple of trees. You don't want to go too nuts. If it says to block the wind, don't put 150 trees in. You're talking maybe 5, 6, 8 trees, something like that. Don't go any more than that.